what are some just general tips and advice you have for someone who really wants running to be a big part of their lifestyle moving forward in order to stay consistent with it long term, like you have, of course?
I like how you say wanting to make running as part of their lifestyle, because I really agree. When you decide to become a runner, it's not just I run 2 or 3 times a week. I think being a runner is waking up till going to bed with the runner's mindset. What does that mean is...
Hello everyone, this is Sam Breiter and I'm the founder of Run Breiter, a digital running community meant to educate, motivate, and entertain beginner runners and runners who struggle with consistency. See all the mental and physical benefits running provides. I've been coaching runners both in person and digitally for 5 years, but have been running both competitively and casually for 14 years. The Run Breiter podcast gives me the opportunity to bring on guests to share their running journeys and running advice. I assure you, listening to this podcast will make you want to run and follow your journey, as the conversations in this episode will send signals to your mind that even when it's cold, you're sore, tired, or going through something, that a run is still well worth doing.
All right. Well, welcome to another episode in the Run Breiter podcast. This is episode number 34, and I'm excited to say we have Adrien Thevenet on, who Adrien was another, person that I connected through the TikTok community, saw some of his awesome content, and we both share a passion for running, but we also share a passion for coaching. It looks like Adrien has done a lot of great work all around the world, as well as locally where he lives, with runners of all abilities, and make some really cool content about it as well. So that's really what led me to want to bring you on here today, Adrien. We work with a lot of beginner runners as well as runners who just want to be more consistent with it and really see all those benefits, whether it's mental, physical, all that good stuff that I'm sure you and I both have gotten from running. But I don't want to do too much of the talking. I really want to open it up to you. First, Adrien, would love to, have you have the opportunity to give a quick background of who you are.
Well, first of all, thank you so much, Sam, for inviting me today on your podcast. I really appreciate it. And thank you for this great presentation, this great introduction. So thanks a lot. So English is not my native language, so please, my apologies in advance for any grammatical errors I might do. So I hope your listeners have a little bit of tolerance for non-native speakers.
No worries. I'm sure they will.
So a little bit about myself. In terms of my running experience, originally I'm from France. I was born in Lyon, but I spent a lot of my youth and my early adult years in Chamonix-Mont-Blanc, the capital of the UTMB. So a lot of the videos that you've seen on my TikTok have been filmed last summer in Chamonix, because that's definitely a location where I enjoy running, and this is where I discovered trail running actually before even the UTMB started. So I've been running for 25 years. I'm 42-year-old now, and I think I have the profile of probably your Western runner, starting easy running in junior high school, and then starting joining the cross country team. And I know a lot of people during college, not everybody practiced sports. I continued doing a lot of running, but I actually really increased my running during college. And then as I did, I have a business degree. I never completely abandoned running after college. I just kept it as a fun activity. And I was living in British Columbia at the time. I don't know, you told me you've never been to Vancouver, but British Columbia has tons of mountains. And having been raised in Chamonix, I'm very, very much into mountaineering and long distance hiking and trekking, etc. So a good way to stay in shape and prepare myself for mountaineering was to continue running in the local Vancouver parks. And in 2012, I had a few close calls with my mountaineering. I almost died in some avalanches and rock falls and other crazy moments. So I said I would probably take a step back from mountaineering, but I still wanted to push my shape. So I decided to join a local run club. And since I was already a decent runner, I wanted to take it to the next level. And with a good coach, we had a really good coach who did outstanding performances when he was younger. He really inspired me to run harder and faster. And not only that, but the community that I made, the friends that I made there, where that was really an inspiration for me. So that allowed me to push myself and to go sub 130 on my half, sub 125, and ended up doing 116 on my half marathon, which I was pretty stoked about. I think that's one of my best performances. Now, I'm not an elite runner, but it definitely got me in the top 10 in a big city like Vancouver. So I was pretty proud about this. And then how did I become a run coach? Because at the time I was working for JP Morgan in the finance industry. And I think after working for the financial industry for about 12 years, I kind of got tired of it. It wasn't as fun and as fulfilling as it used to be. And I wanted to, I'm an adventurer, so I wanted to go to somewhere completely different. And I had an opportunity to go to Shanghai. So I moved to Shanghai. And instead of working in the financial industry, which I don't have any competitive edge because China has plenty of financial analysts and financial directors that definitely didn't need an additional person. I knew that my 25 years of running and my passion for running was quite unique. So I decided to launch a run coaching business in China. And that actually worked really, really well. It worked so well that I was making a lot more money in the coaching business than I was ever doing in the financial industry, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. But it was, people were really interested in what I had to bring them. So we were acquiring a lot of customers. Unfortunately, COVID hit, and that slowed down everything. And the things were picking up after. So in China, things got a little bit better before it did in the West. So probably by summer 2020, things were getting better. But then when you guys were getting out of COVID progressively, we got back into it progressively too, where August, September 2021, things started to get canceled again. And then 2022 was just a write-off in terms of business. So now we're in Barcelona. We're managing a lot of our athletes remotely because I use applications such as Training Peaks, which I'm sure you're familiar with. That allows me to coach my athletes around the world. But we're thinking about heading back to China now that the economy is reopening. And to be honest, I'm getting calls every single day from China saying, when are you coming back? We need to do this for this and that. So I wouldn't take a brief summary of myself, but I tried to tell you as much as I could.
No, that's an amazing story. And I thank you so much for opening it up. It really gives me a really good perspective of who you are. First of all, kudos to you for 25 years of running. That is something that a lot of people can't say they've ever achieved or will ever achieve, because I think you and I both know one of the biggest challenges with running is staying consistent with it. I think some people get into it for a short amount of time, see some quick benefits, and then kind of get over it. But I guess for you, what has allowed you for such a long period to stay so consistent with running? I'm sure at certain points you've been more competitive than others. You've ran more miles than others. You've been faster, slower, whatever it might be. But it sounds like you've stuck with it and really have enjoyed it for such a long time. So what practices have you put in to really allow you to continue running for such a long period of time?
You know, I've done a few podcasts, and that question never come up, and I think it's a really great question. Because that makes me think, why do I still run after 25 years? Yeah. And I think on all levels, you know, sentimental, business, life is really, you know, different chapters. And even for my running, I think there's different chapters in my running life. So I told you, after business school, after college, I was running not to run, but just to have a great shape, be like feeling fit. On the mountain, you really need to have, if you need to cross some dangerous slope, you want to be able to cross as fast as possible. You want to have those strong legs to go up the hill. So, and then after I got tired of mountaineering because it was too risky, I became a competitive runner, and I literally went, you know, I remember like when I was a hardcore mountaineer, I would do 10K in 40 minutes, which is pretty good, but nothing crazy. Then to doing 10K in 32 minutes, which was starting to get quite decent, right? And you're starting to be quite competitive. But then after, when I went to China, because I started having my own business, I was getting a lot busier. I also got married and had a child, so I couldn't train as hard. but then it became running with the community. So running with a lot of Chinese runners. And these runners are so thirsty and curious of your running style and your running knowledge. So I was feeling fulfilled a lot by, living vicariously through my athletes, through my running community in China, because I was bringing so much value to them. I also ran with a lot of young Chinese Americans in Shanghai, where I helped them to become student athletes. So of course I was not running at the top of my shape, but it was so cool to see, a young adult or a teenager do their 5K from 20 minutes to 16 minutes. And that motivates you and you want to run with these people. So I've had a lot of different running chapters in my life, and that's why it's made it so, I've been able to run consistently. However, it doesn't matter the perspective I have on my running, my body remains the same. And I don't know about you, Sam, but the body is paying more and more and more. And the runs are becoming less and less pleasant with, tendinitis, ligament injuries, Achilles pain, etc. But we got to build the psychological more than the body these days to keep running.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I mean, definitely as you get older, it gets harder, but I mean, I think and you'll probably be able to talk about it too, different ways in which you can prevent some of those injuries from coming up and, recover back from those. But I mean, I think what you were really talking about as far as like having different chapters of life, as well as making an impact on people, has really been a great way for you to see running for such a consistent part of your life and being able to continue it. I mean, for me, like when I created my brand, I was like back into running. I had taken like 1 to 2 years off of competitive running, but I created my brand and it really motivated me to want to be personally competitive because I'm seeing other people be successful and I'm trying to encourage other people and try to set that example. So I definitely hear where you're coming from there. Now, I'm curious, as far as getting into coaching, I really like that story, obviously going from that corporate job and not really having that, passion for it. It sounded like after doing it for a long time and then switching to coaching. How has that transition been for you? I mean, obviously it sounds like from a financial standpoint, it's been paying dividends for you clearly. But I mean,
until COVID.
What was that? I'm sorry.
Until COVID 2020.
Yeah. But I mean, outside of the money side of things, have you been feeling consistently that fire under your belt about doing this? And, what are some things you've learned about being a coach of runners and doing it full time?
Yeah, that's another great question. So when I remember, in my previous corporate job, I would know to the penny how much I would make every month, right? And then when I decided to make this big switch, it was such a big deal because I've had such a sense of job security and financial security for 13 years. I was really, it was a culture shock, like how am I going to live without knowing how much I'm going to make next month? But the thing is, at the time I was single, I had no debt, I had some savings, and I told myself, if a guy like you doesn't open his business, doesn't take risks like this, nobody on earth will ever open a business. I mean, you have literally no excuse to not throw yourself into this project. Like, why? And I had so many friends, they were my age, but they had 2-3 kids, they had a mortgage, they had debt, and they were dreaming of opening their business. They had so much ambition. And so I owed it to them. I owed it to everyone who didn't have the level of freedom to open a business. But I remember when I finally took the decision, I bought my plane ticket and got my visa for China. Before heading out to China, every morning for many months, when I would wake up, I'd look at the ceiling and I felt the weight of the world on my chest saying, what are you doing? How crazy are you to do this? But this famous sentence is everything you want in life is out of your comfort zone really resonated with me. I'm sure you're familiar with this sentence. And that is the sentence that got me going. And I really believed in it. And I still truly believe in it. And that when I arrived in China, because I was so passionate about my project, I believed so much into that. That's something that no one can copy. I think you see it on social media today is when people are genuine and really feel strongly about a subject and about their passion or want to share their expertise, the public is there. People really resonate well with there. Doesn't matter which culture, which country you're from. People will at least listen to you, and as soon as you have people willing to listen to you, you're gonna end up with people wanting to, have you as part of their lives and you monetizing your services.
That's great. That's great. So, I mean, at this point, though, obviously you work with runners all around the world, but what skill level do you typically work with? Are there certain specialties you have with the runners that you work with? Obviously, you do a lot of endurance running yourself. But what is the type of person who might be listening right now that would really benefit the most from your services?
Well, I think I really enjoy people who really want to make progress and make change. I really want to enjoy my work, and I don't enjoy my work by just giving horrible trainings, like difficult trainings to athletes. I enjoy my work when people are truly happy with my services. Let's be honest, some of us really like to be recognized for their hard work, and I'm one of them. I really like to be recognized, and I really like to please my athletes. I'm not particularly cheap, so there's nothing more than I hate is providing training plans that are not being followed or the athletes are not interested. They just hire me because they think everything's going to change without doing an effort. So if you're an athlete that's really willing to change your life and listen to I consider myself now, after 4 or 5 years of coaching, as a subject matter expert and willing to train hard, then we can definitely work together. I think it doesn't matter your level. If you're a beginner or an advanced runner, my goal is to have you do as much progress as you can. Now, of course, if you just started running, we're going to try to drop your 10K by 10, 20, 30 minutes, who knows? But if you're an intense runner, if we can make you drop your 10K by just a few minutes, by just even 1 minute, then we will achieve even a bigger feat. So I really don't care about your level. I'm more interested in your level of motivation and your commitment to working together.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I couldn't agree more. I think obviously you have to understand like who you're working with and the level that they're at. And once you have a good idea of that, it's easier to understand the potential that you can really put into that person and see that person pan out with putting in the right training. Now, I'd be curious, I mean, something that I have approached a lot with some of the runners that I work with is they're beginner runners and they don't really know necessarily what race to start with, where to select. I'd be curious if you have like a typical piece of advice for that, because I think that's something people can overthink so much to the point where they don't end up signing up for a race and they end up just running and not really sticking with it, because without a race, I feel like it's hard to sometimes see all that recognition and a sense of accomplishment that naturally comes with running, right?
If you're asking me what I recommend to do as the first race, I actually highly recommend to start with easy trail runs. So like a cross country, and this is why young runners do mostly cross country running, because it's a funner environment. It's not as stressful. You're not in the city. So I think that's why junior high school, and college promote cross country running, because it's mentally it's easier than just raw road running. So I tested this with several of my, new runners, people who never ran before and wanted to get into it. And they asked me, what should I start with? And I always recommend to do a local trail run. Of course, I have a lot of athletes in Canada, so there are many options. But you who are from New York and Florida, there's also plenty of trail running locations in those areas. So why do I recommend trail running is, first of all, I feel the community of trail runners, most of them really go there casually. I feel it's a tight community. I feel people are very welcoming. People are extremely friendly. I feel it's less intimidating than a road run. On a 5K, 10K, half marathon, you got all those tall guys wearing singlets, 3-inch shorts, and you kind of feel out of place when you go there and it's your first race. But when you go to a trail race, you might have a few guys wearing some extreme gear, but most of them, people are going to be there quite cheerful, and you're going to see various kind of shapes and forms, people of all ages, people of all weights. And I feel that's a very welcoming environment in general. So, and people trail on because they just want to have fun. It's hard to be competitive. Nobody can say I'm going to beat my time, because every trail run has its own personal best time. So I find it's a good option. And of course, don't go something too technical like in Chamonix, but there's a lot of trail runs that are quite flat and it's easy on the knees and on the hips to run on dirt or grass versus then running 5K on hard pavement.
For sure. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think going to like a nice, easy trail run, especially that community aspect that you spoke about. I love trail runs for that reason. I have really felt that. So I can assure you, everyone, what Adrien's saying, that's definitely legit. Definitely some really good advice. Now, this question, I think it's a little bit more general, but I think can really provide a lot of value in a lot of different ways. And I think everyone has a slightly different answer to this question, whether it's a running coach or someone who's just a running expert and just trains for themselves. What advice would you say for a beginner runner, someone who maybe has been running for like a year or so, or just getting into it for the first time, but still has a lot to learn, still hasn't really ran a lot of races? What are some just general tips and advice you have for someone who really wants running to be a big part of their lifestyle moving forward in order to stay consistent with it long term, like you have, of course?
I like how you say one, to make running as part of their lifestyle, because I really agree. When you decide to become a runner, it's not just I run 2 or 3 times a week. I think being a runner is waking up till going to bed with the runner's mindset. What does that mean is, how do you place making sure that every day you're supposed to run, you make that a priority. That means you don't eat garbage throughout the day because you want to feel good for that run if it's in the evening, or if you run in the morning, that you wake up early enough to get the run in. That you have a healthy lifestyle. That means, of course, as a runner, I don't recommend to smoke, to drink too much. Really make every aspect of your life revolve around running, because I truly believe you're gonna enhance the quality of your life and just feel a lot more fulfilled with your week by having a week with 20 to 30K or 10 to 20 miles versus to be a non-active person. But if you want to be a beginner, if you want to start running, just be progressive. It's really important to not do too much. One of the biggest value I had when I went to China, a lot of Chinese people, they discovered the sport of running. And unfortunately, of course, they really think that the only race that's valuable in China is the marathon race. They think anything under the marathon is not a respectable distance. So the problem is, you have people who never ran their whole lives and they suddenly start getting ready for marathon distances. So we have tons of injuries, tons of people with bad knees because they didn't prep themselves properly. They didn't build the muscular strength. And so one of the things I started doing is, through my social media in China, was really add only 2 to 3% increase in your weekly mileage. Go easy, give yourself the breaks, be kind to your body, do the rolling exercises, do the stretching. Those are really important. And don't start right away with a marathon, because you're going to ruin yourself. Because if you buy any training plan, Sam, for a marathon, which they have access to, it's going to say, well, you're supposed, after week 8 or 9, you're going to start running 32 kilometers to get ready for the marathon race. And if you don't have that base all of your life, you're going to mess up your body for sure. So progressive. And then the other piece of advice is find yourself a great community to run with. It really motivates you. If you can't find a specific community, find yourself a running partner. I always say 90% of the work is done when you got the shoes on and you're outside. 10% is just the run. Knowing that somebody's waiting for you outside, that did the effort to go out and to go running with you, that's going to really help you with those 90%.
Yeah. I mean, I think the fact that you talk about, one, running with a community, running with a partner, that advice is so big, because I think doing anything yourself, obviously you can see a lot of benefits with it, but having someone push you, that's so big. And, outside of that, I mean, I think just a ton of really good advice you just brought up. And I thought it was interesting how you spoke about the fact that in China, and I didn't know this about China, they're a respectable race. They consider that to be the marathon. And you see a lot of injuries come from that naturally. I think even in New York City, I don't know, that might just be more of like a social thing, but with New York City being such a big marathon, I know so many people who go from never running at all to like training for the marathon, and then they can't walk for 2 weeks, and they're like, Sam, like, I don't think I can run again. And it's just like,
and they hate the sport.
exactly. Start with a 5K, like get that experience, get those, because it's not even the running part too, I think. I think part of it is it's mental. Like the fact that you go from nothing to this crazy environment with thousands of runners, and anything can, I think during a marathon, something is going to go wrong for even skilled runners, and a beginner, there's probably a ton of things that go wrong. But I do want to talk about the injury topic, because obviously, I think you and I both agree that someone shouldn't necessarily just go from nothing to a marathon. But whether it's training for a marathon or even just training for a 5K, a lot of beginner runners we see either getting really bad soreness, which they may think is injury, or it actually is an injury, right? And I hear a lot of shin splints, knee pain, things like that. What have you seen a lot of success with your runners that you work with, both with recovering from injuries when they happen, as well as what do you tell them off the bat to make sure these injuries are avoided as much as possible throughout training?
So I think my responsibility as a running coach is, first of all, the mileage, right? So it's my responsibility to not give them too much mileage. And I don't know if you're familiar with the TSS, total stress score, which is kind of a scoring system for all your efforts that you do during the week or the season or the month, etc. So always try to use the TSS scoring system to make sure it's a progressive injury. So that's my responsibility to avoid the injury. Then the other one is I do ask my athletes to do a lot of rolling. I do a lot of rolling for myself. I truly believe that getting ITBS is very easy for most runners. As you know, it's the most common. It's not an injury. It's a condition. So how do we prevent ITBS? So I tell my athletes, don't wait to feel the pain, because once you get ITBS, you're gonna lose a lot of time to get rid of it. So constantly roll, stretch, make sure that the ligaments in your muscles are always nice and flexible by doing the stretching and rolling exercises. Then I do ask my athletes to change their shoes depending on their weight, anything between, say, 250 miles to 400 miles. So to change their shoes, especially the heavier they are, the more often they need to change their shoes. Those are points. I also insist, and this is something I'm able to track on Training Peaks, is that they have a high cadence. I like them to have a cadence around 180, regardless of their speed. Now, if they're super slow, that gets quite tricky to have. But I always, in every single analysis I do with my runs, is like, what's my athlete cadence? And if they have a high cadence of 180, that tells me it's very likely that they're keeping their feet close to the ground, and that the impact is minimized by having short strides and high cadence. So and also avoiding overstriding, right? Having your your front feet land in front of your center of gravity. So that's a good way to avoid knee injuries. So those are my main things. And of course, I always make sure that my athletes have I give a lot of tempo trainings. I give a lot of high intensity interval trainings. So we always make sure that the athletes get at least 15 to 25 minute warm up prior to doing these high intensity workouts.
Great. Really helpful advice. And do you also coach your athletes on how they should manage their nutrition? I know you spoke about earlier, expressing the importance of living a healthy lifestyle. You spoke about trying not to smoke, trying to not drinking too much, but do you walk your athletes through what their weekly eating should look like at all, or just give any general tips on nutrition?
So as you know, as a certified running coach, I do have certifications, but I don't have a nutritionist certification. I actually do work with a nutritionist. So we've, sometimes I provide, she's on my team, on the Run Force team for certain athletes, but of course she's also a nutritionist by herself. So when I have athletes that have very specific needs, we'll work with a nutritionist. When I have athletes that just want general tips, then we can design actually quite good nutrition plan thanks to different programs. But again, we always say this is not, this is a general plan. If you really want to get specific, you need to work with a certified nutritionist. But a lot of my athletes, they just want to have general tips. For example, what do I eat for in the morning? I say, well, don't go with a full banana, have a half banana. Or how do I lose weight? And we give them advice. I'm a big, I practice myself fasting. So I do a lot of fasting and I give tips for fasting, and that helps a lot of my athletes lose weight, telling them when, for example, to do most of their runs when they're at a certain period of their fasting, at a certain point in their fasting during the day. So we can help them lose weight, and losing weight is another way to prevent injury, because as you know, the lighter you are, the less stress you put on your body while you're running. So we don't always want all our athletes to lose weight, but I know that losing weight helps. Well, first of all, a lot of athletes are happy to lose weight because they have weight goals, but also it makes you feel better on your run.
When someone is training for running, especially those who are looking at losing weight, are there any other like quick tips that you think have been helpful, like foods to avoid, foods that you recommend, things like that, or like even how they should incorporate supplementation with their running and their lifestyle, anything like that that you think would be good to add?
So I take supplements, but nothing crazy like vitamin D, magnesium, etc. I don't recommend any supplements that any of my athletes. But another thing is alcohol. A lot of my athletes are businessmen, and they have their business trips, and they're required to drink. And I ask them, like, try to really minimize your drinking. Be straightforward with your clients or your business partners and tell them that you're not interested in alcohol at this point. I know a lot of people right now are doing dry January, I think. I guess there must be a lot of drinking today since we're February 1st. But I think drinking is people gain a lot of weight through drinking. I also tell them, have a conversation with your spouse. Tell them your weight goals, and tell them to not bring home, snacks and treats and things like that. You really need to be mindful of everything you eat. I recommend also to keep a journal of everything that you eat. But I'll go back to the fasting point. Why do I really push for fasting? Is because, for example, me from 7 p.m. to noon the next day, there is no eating. That means there is no midnight snack. There is no breakfast. There is no morning snack. So just that will prevent me from calorie intake. And there's so much I can eat in a short 7-hour period. So that also helps. Personally, that helps me, and that's helped a lot of my athletes lose a lot of weight.
Amazing. I'm curious too, like how many runners, I don't know if you keep track of it, but like how many runners have you worked with or are you currently working with? I'd be curious like how much of an impact you've been able to make at this point with all the great tips and advice you obviously have in your knowledge bank there.
Yeah. So are you familiar with Coros, the watch brand?
Yeah, I am.
So I worked a lot with Coros. So it's funny, they call themselves an international company, but they are ultimately a Chinese company. A lot of their designs, I think in the US, they do a lot of marketing, and they have a head office in the US with the US CEO, but ultimately they're quite a Chinese company. So there was a lot of opportunities to work with Coros, and I was probably one of the first to launch the first online camp ever in China. So we had 500 runners right there. So of course, through social media and videos and a lot of projects, I probably worked with thousands and thousands of runners. But of course, with the first large scale, where I was able to have a very strong impact on a large group of runners, and that was a tremendous experience. And I remember, for them, China's a very interesting country. They have so much respect for the coach. The coach is the teacher, and it's really that traditional aspect. And I have a client. He's like the CEO for this crazy company in China, and he talks to me as teacher, or coach with with the terms of a lot of respect. Whereas it's like, well, I'm just a running coach, and I know what you teach. So it's funny. And when I would work with this group of 500 people, they would show so much respect. And what they really loved is I love to design original trainings and stuff like that. So, for example, I don't know if you're familiar, but China and high-speed trains, they're very advanced with high-speed trains. And there was they have names for their high-speed train. Like, for example, I forgot the name. It would be like the KB 104, which is kind of the Shenzhen to Shanghai fast-speed train. And I would name a training called the KB 1054, just like the train line. and it would be a training where they would have to go fairly fast. And they just love that kind of stuff because it was using everyday stuff and references that they would be familiar with, and they know it's a fast train, and then they would use it. For example, China also has these great rockets that to go to space to launch their satellites, and I would take the China, I forgot, it was like Toyang, I forgot the name of the rocket, but basically I would take the name of the rocket and create a specific thing, calling it the Toyang for this kind of crazy interval training. And they love it because you put a little bit of patriotism in there and you know, the national pride for their advanced technology. So, and mix it with training. So I've had a lot of fun training people in China there. It's very, very receptive public.
That's amazing. I love that. Yeah. And I'd be curious. So if someone's listening to this episode right now and they want to work with you, right? They want to, they hear that you're someone obviously who has, yeah, obviously you're a certified running coach, and you obviously have worked with tons of runners all around the world with so many different areas within running. What would they expect to get out of your services? Obviously, it sounds like a custom plan based on their specific goals and needs. But what does that whole experience actually look like? I'd be curious.
Yeah, so my original plan was personalized training plan on Training Peaks. With most athletes now have compatible watches with structured workout, which means that when you're running, you get a targeted pace that's specific to your level on the watch. So, you know, the watch will say, "Hey, Sam, your warm up is between." How do you train, Sam? What do you use as training? Do you use your heart rate? Do you use your pace, or
I go by pace personally, but I've been kind of thinking of adjusting to heart rate personally, but right now pace.
Well, pace is very good. So, for example, do your 7 minutes mile for your warm up, and then the watch is going to say, okay, now you got to go at 6:30 minutes a mile, depending on what you're training on. So that's very specific. And then before I would do a weekly call, but I realized that for most of my athletes, a weekly call is too much. So now I'm doing just a monthly call, which is more cost efficient for the athletes. And so usually you get your weekly training plan plus your monthly call. But what I really love is we stay in contact on a regular basis through Messenger or WhatsApp. And when my athletes have a question or need to modify the training, and even I usually have 2 point of contacts per week with my athletes through WhatsApp or Messenger, and we'll be like, hey Sam, how are you feeling? How did the training go? I did the analysis. You did really good today, but I'm seeing some cardiovascular drift. Just before talking to you, Sam, I have an athlete. He's actually in Saudi Arabia. He's Canadian, and he just finished his half marathon. And I was comparing his heart rate to his pace, and I'm telling him, like, I think you didn't recover from your half marathon. It's way too high. So, I just sent a message out because I'll do my analysis on a regular basis. Again, I'm a full-time run coach, so I can afford taking the time to do these analysis and give back to my athletes.
That's great. That's great. Amazing. And yeah, I mean, so, because obviously there might be someone listening to this right now who might want to go ahead and take advantage of your services. Where would they actually go? Do they reach out to you directly? Do they do it through a website link? That's the ability to open up with how someone could work with you.
Yeah. So my website is runforce.org, runforce.org, and there's a contact form, and we respond within 24 hours. And we have athletes. So we have some athletes, of course, in China. We have athletes in Europe, in the Middle East, and a lot in the U.S. and a lot in Canada. We have right now a lot of athletes that are prepping for college in private schools in New England.
That's great. That's great. And outside of that, I know you also have your own personal brand where, I mean, you're obviously on TikTok. That's how I found you. Is it just solely TikTok where you create that content for? Are you also on Instagram? Do you have any other social pages where you create some of that content?
Right now, the main focus is on TikTok. I think I got tired of Instagram. I think they've gone through too much changes, and I wasn't able to keep up. Yeah. And then I kind of I find TikTok very fun. My bad. I think anybody who's doing Instagram is absolutely right. And especially, I am on, you can also look me up on YouTube on Run Force. I did a few. I post some of the same videos. If you're not a TikTok fan, you can look at Run Force on YouTube. There's the same videos. Yeah, right now it's TikTok and YouTube are my main point. If you're Chinese, we also have a WeChat official channel.
Awesome. Yeah. I mean, I think, if I were someone who is new to running or looking at getting a PR, you'd definitely be someone I'd be looking at working with. So really appreciate it. And anything else, Adrien, that you want to bring up to the community here? It could be like a final tip or something else you want to bring up about your brand. I mean, anything else you want to bring up here before we let you get back to your day?
I always want to make sure people realize that running can be taken off roads. I think roads is kind of mandatory because it's practical and easy. I tell all my athletes that just do road running, make sure that you try out trail running. I really fell in love with running on the trails of Chamonix, where I was able to run distances that people had to take a backpack and would take 1 or even 2 days to do. And I was able to do it just in the morning. And running is freedom. And I love freedom, and I love to be fit in the sense that I don't have to worry about my health, because running has kept me healthy all these years. I'm 42 and touch my head and I'm still doing great. And that's mostly thanks to running. So take the opportunity not only to feel free with running, but to manage your life around it, and a lot of good things will happen to you. I really guarantee it. It's not just a sport, it's really a way of life.
Yeah. Running is freedom. I really love that saying, and I couldn't agree more with it. So really, really great final tip. Thank you so much again, Adrien. This has been so much fun. And seriously, I say this to people when I have them on, but I'm not kidding. Like, if there's anything in the future I can help you out with, let me know. Obviously, we're all part of this running community in a digital way. So, happy to repay the favor of you coming on in any way I possibly can. But like we said here, if anyone is interested in working with Adrien, check out his website, check him out on social. He's got some really cool content. That's the reason we brought him on. But I love speaking with other running coaches and learning about their approaches with their runners. And I really think he can make a great impact with really any runner out there who's looking for, as we talked about earlier, that lifestyle of running that both me and Adrien have found.
Yeah, and same to you, Sam. If you need anything, make sure to reach out. You have my number now.
Great. Well, thank you everyone so much for listening to another episode of the Run Breiter podcast. As always, don't forget to run brighter. We'll be back with another one here real soon. Thanks.